Good afternoon. We are here at the European Parliament today to talk about torture. Not about medieval practices in dark dungeons. We will talk about torture which happens today as we speak in many places, and many of us don't know anything about it. We are joined here by Catarina Vieira, who is member of our subcommittee on human rights. And our other guests are Gabi from Venezuela and Shafi from Afghanistan. Both of you are human rights defenders. Both of you live in exile in Spain and in France. And both of you are here in Parliament this week to participate in the Sakharov Fellowship program. And this is a program which is meant to make you even better at defending human rights. And it's a program linked to Parliament's Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought, which is the highest distinction Parliament gives to human rights defenders. So we are here to talk about torture because today is the International Day in support of victims of torture, and to explore with you your stories, how you're related to this topic, and also what we can do for the victims. Gabi, would you give it a start?
Well, thank you so much for this invitation, and I really think it's very important to highlight this day because sadly there are still a lot of victims of torture around the world. In Venezuela's case specifically, the torture is applied in a systematically way since long ago because they want to show what can happen to anyone who dares to raise their voices and to demand the respect of human rights. And yeah, I mean...
And of what kind of torture are we speaking?
Yeah, well, by one side we highlight the classical arsenal of tortures, physical tortures as drownings, asphyxiation, beatings, but regardless that these practices are well known in the dictatorship in Venezuela, they have also developed new ways of torture that can't be that don't leave any track on the body of the person.
So how would this work in practice? You're speaking of a torture which one could not see. So we have also international mechanisms to
Exactly.
Monitor practices of torture. So inspectors would come to prisons to check how the inmates are treated. What would they see when they come to Venezuela?
Yeah, absolutely. These kind of tortures are psychological. And myself, I experienced very closely one of these practices that is called white torture. And this was a group of cells underground in the main headquarters of the intelligence services. They were only 7 cells that didn't have any window, so the people in there couldn't see the sunlight never. They lose their notion of time. They also were suffered sensory deprivation of colors and sounds. They were continuously exposed to artificial light, so it's going to be in nowhere. You know, like you are, there is no time, there is no life in there. So obviously, in this way, they look to break you, to do whatever they want without leaving any track. Because if one of the custodies come and take you a picture to send it to UN organism, for example, they are not going to see the damage. But this kind of damage is even worse than the physical ones, because I don't want to, put it to relativate anything, but a one heals. But this kind of pain psychological pain is more difficult.
Leaves traces, and in this
Yes.
sense it's a very insidious way of
Absolutely.
torturing people, because we always think of these, what you described as a classic arsenal,
Exactly.
and with torture instruments, but the absence of everything, and the
Yeah.
presence of light 24/7
Yeah.
in a white cell, this is why it's called white torture, can equally be a very, very cruel form.
And even if the persons gets out of there, the ones are still inside, because it takes you a lot of time to heal this damage.
Turning to Shafi, how does torture look like in Afghanistan from your experience?
Well, Stephen, I'm talking on behalf of a country that the half of the population right now, they are subjected with mentally torture every single day. Even right now, we are in here, we are talking about it, but in a part of the country, something is happening. But it's in generally, because I'm talking about the women and girls in Afghanistan, that unfortunately it is more than 3 years that the schools and universities are banned for them, and they are not able to go to university and schools. Even they don't have rights, like primary rights for education, for freedom, for everything. They are every day living with this kind of mentally torture. But if I'm coming to especially the kind of torture in Afghanistan, the Taliban are using like maybe 4 or 5 kind of this torture, but 3 of them is more popular and they are using it a lot. The first is whipping. When so it's using a lot by the Taliban and everywhere. Every day, like we have, because I'm a journalist and I'm in contact with the people, I'm a human rights defender as well, and I know about the current situation very well. So every day we have this kind of news that in somewhere in Afghanistan the Taliban's whipping the people, and they are asking for the other people to come and watching them. The second thing, or the second kind of the torture in Afghanistan, is stunning, unfortunately, that it's happened in somewhere. And the third is, I can say that it's electronic shocking, that it's subjected to the former soldiers in Afghanistan, to the human rights activists, and also to many other people. For example, a few months ago, I had an interview with Julia Parsi, and she is a protester woman that she was spent like more than 1 month in prison of the Taliban. And what she said for me, that the first thing that the Taliban applied to her when she was an individual cell in prison, it was electronic shocking. So they have their own ways that how to do it, but this is the first thing that when somebody is came in the prison of the Taliban. And the second thing that it is really hard her that when she was talking about it with me, it was about the videos that the Taliban are capturing from her, like forced her to say something in front of the camera. It's a kind of torture that the Taliban is doing with the women protesters in Afghanistan. But this is something that it's happening right now in Afghanistan, and unfortunately, like it's difficult to go inside the prison of the Taliban to know that what is like. So this is something that we all know about it.
This is also part of your work as a human rights defender and a journalist to bring these cases to the forefront.
Exactly.
And tell people what is happening.
Exactly, but what we need to, if we have this permission, or if like everybody have this permission inside the country, those who are involved in these kind of situations, that to have access to the prison of the Taliban to see what is like those tortures that we don't know about it. So this is something that it's public and we know about it, that it's happening in Afghanistan. But I believe that it is something other, like some kind of other tortures that it's applying from the side of the Taliban that we don't know about it in prison of the Taliban.
Catarina, do you want to comment?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for both of you, for both Gabriela and Shafi, for being here and sharing with us these points. It's obviously tremendously concerning. And unfortunately, in my role in the Human Rights Subcommittee, I see that torture continues to be a huge issue, not only in Venezuela, not only in Afghanistan, but a little bit all over the world, to be honest. We see this very unfortunate trend of shrinking civic space, in which more and more authoritarian regimes are persecuting the people in their country. So whether that is environmental defenders, whether that is the trade unions, whether that would be the journalists or student protesters or whoever it is, there are more and more arbitrary arrests or enforced disappearances, and people are taken into jail, and many times there's horrible conditions, and torture can also be one of the things that is used exactly to try to silence the population and to try to make sure that people stay off the streets and stop the protest. I think obviously in the European Union we're concerned about this, and we try to do our best to, through resolutions, through questions, through diplomatic methods, through all the means we can, raise this with the authorities of the countries, sometimes more successfully than others. But what's very important is that we do not apply double standards. So whichever country is doing this, it should not matter if that's a partner country of ours or not. And oftentimes it can be harder to get a very firm commitment from either the European Parliament or the European Union, the Commission or the Member States, to really be critical of countries with which we have close ties, in which we are linked through trade, or we have economic interests. And that should not be the case. We should apply international law to every one of our relationships and be consistent and coherent in our call for respect of human rights, and including the stop of torture.
So I think before we explore further what you think the European Union should do for your respective countries, which I'm sure Catarina can elaborate on, I would like you to make us understand what does it mean in a society when violence and torture are parts of the daily lives of people. You've been describing that whipping, lashing people happens publicly, like a show where people go like for entertainment almost. At the same time, you describe practices which are well known that they happen, but they are not documented because people don't have access to prisons and information, and the Taliban don't let anybody in. And Gabi described this specific form of white torture where also people are locked away and they don't even know that there is an outside world there. So this goes well without people knowing about it. But how does a society live this presence of violence and torture in your cases?
Well, the Taliban use torture or whipping the people to hold people down. Those who are coming and watching this whipping and the Taliban did in front of the people. So they want to make silence the people, because I know in Afghanistan many people, they are not agree what the Taliban doing there, and they are against the Taliban. When they arrest their vice, the Taliban will do this punishment on them. It's whipping or maybe another kind of the torture. So that's why when the whipping is happening in Afghanistan, the Taliban ask the people, mostly the men and the children, to come and watch what we are doing in here and how we are whipping the people that they made some crimes or something. So unfortunately, among all these people that they are coming and watching the moment of whipping in Afghanistan, in a part of the country, the most focused thing is about the children that they are there, you know, because for a child in 10 years old or 12 years old, it is the time to learn many good things, not to come in somewhere in watching what the Taliban is doing with the people in like whipping somebody or flogging somebody. So it means that they are trying to change the mind of the people, mostly the mind of the children, that they are the future of Afghanistan. Like, we don't know what will be happen in 10 years and after 10 years when these child are going bigger, like 18 years old or 19 years old, they will come with the extremism ideas.
Here we have a connection with what you were mentioning,
I
no?
absolutely agree with that because, yes, I think that for people watching this outside a jail, it has a tremendous impact because in this kind of context, in Venezuela, for example, there is no rule of law. So you can be detained, arbitrarily detained in any moment. So you can see that this can happen to you very easily, and to live with that, besides the many other situations that Venezuelans face in a daily life, is very hard. I think people is scared. You don't even think about raising your voice, but at the same time you are suffering because you are dealing with all these authoritarian context that is in your country, with economical, social challenges, you know. And the suffering for me is dramatic in societies when these, as in Venezuela, where torture is so systematized. Yeah.
So what would be your requests? What should the international community, what should and can the European Union do? What would you ask the European Union to do for Afghanistan, for Afghan women and for human rights in Afghanistan?
As a human rights defender and as a journalist, it is very important to talk about the current situation and mostly about what the Taliban doing inside the country right now with the women and also with the children, with everyone, with everybody, to talk everywhere about it. For example, we are in here in front of the camera, we are talking about the current situation, we are talking about the torture in Afghanistan. It is too much, and we really need it, because when we are talking about the current situation, it means that we are not forget the people of Afghanistan. We are not forget the women of Afghanistan. And we are thinking about them. And we are trying to raise their voices. That's okay that in Afghanistan they don't have this right to raise their voice. Even they come many times to on the streets and raise their voices. But at the end, the Taliban shoot it on them, arrested them, or many other things. But we are in here in a safe place, and we can do many things for them. The EU can do a lot of things because the EU you are a member of the parliament and you have your plenary sessions every month. I think, if I'm not wrong, if like in one of them, every time you talk about the current situation, about the torture, about what are the women currently surviving in Afghanistan and their experience and everything, that's everything for the women. And it means that you and all other organizations not forget the women of Afghanistan. So one thing. The second thing, as a journalist, I'm in contact with the people of Afghanistan, and I know the story of the woman who was in prison of the Taliban. We are documented all these stories. Maybe it's gonna be like a collaboration between me as a human rights defender and the members of the parliament in here to just send all these stories for them, and then it will be a documented story in here in EU that these women have this kind of experience in Afghanistan. I think the third thing that we can do in here to have panels, as EU did it many times before about Afghanistan. Maybe it's not possible amount one time, but in a 2 months, 3 months one times to talk about the current situation, it will be good that we can come with update news in here and talk about the situation. And also, the EU, because the EU delegations, they are in Afghanistan and they are actively working with there, and they are in contact with the Taliban, of course. They can force the Taliban to stop this torture inside the country. Like whipping somebody in front of many people, it's a crime. And it's always like doing by the side of the Taliban. Maybe if it's possible that the EU force the Taliban to just stop this. It's okay that what's going on inside the prison of the Taliban, and it's not possible for us to go inside and see what's going on, but what's in public, we can do something to stop this in there. Yeah, I think these three things that may be possible to do it like urgently, but there's something else that maybe in the future we can talk about it.
Gabi, what will be the requests from the Venezuelan perspective? What should the EU do?
Well, first, I am agree with you that the human rights issue in Venezuela and in many places has to be approached since a critical way, because I think right now we are seeing in the war in general a lot of polarization, have a negative impact in the discussion of human rights. So my first request would be like to help us, the civil society, to keep pushing to the different political groups to maintain a critical eye on the situation. And I think another thing that is very powerful is to keep supporting the victims and the NGO to raise their voices, because sometimes we Venezuelans feel lost because we don't know what else to do. It has been 25 years with this dictatorship, but I believe that as long as there is still people that who dares to continue raising their voices, we are going to have hope. So if an institution like this can keep supporting victims, NGOs, civil society to organize and to have a voice that is heard whenever they want, they could, it's going to be hope for us.
So for Catarina, for you members of the European Parliament, the Sakharov Prize is one of the tools you use also in the cases we have here. The Venezuelan Democratic Opposition received this prize last year and already before in 2017. In the case of Afghanistan, the women of Afghanistan were finalists of the Sakharov Prize. So how do you use this tool, and what beyond can the European Union, should the EU do to help the people and to stop practices like torture?
Well, the Sakharov Prize is, of course, extremely important because it gives this recognition, this much needed recognition and platform and stage to so many people who are fighting for democracy, for human rights. And so I'm really proud that the European Parliament does this every year, and I hope we continue to bring many important voices also through the networks and all of these young people coming here to the Parliament. Further than that, there's so much the EU can and should do. There's a lot we can do in a very practical way in terms of, for example, trade. So there is a EU anti-torture regulation that kind of establishes what are items that we do not export because they can be used for enforcing methods of torture, or equipment that is normally being used by police but is actually being used in prisons in a very unsafe way. So, make sure that we also have rules in place for items that could be having dual use. Sometimes this is about, if we export video cameras, where are they being exported to and for what purpose are they being used? Are they being used to target protesters on the street and to then put them into jail? So, there's a lot of very practical things we can do through legislation. We also have a very important diplomatic role to play, and a lot can be done through what you were saying, these urgency resolutions. We hold 3 of them every month in Strasbourg. We try to talk about different parts of the world, make sure it's diverse, make sure we include the voices of civil society. That brings me to civil society. That's another really important thing. The European Union can and should provide funding to civil society in other countries because they are at the forefront of documenting the practices that go on, because if you don't know, then you don't know, and that's the best thing for impunity of the regimes, is if no one knows about it, not in the country, not outside, then you can't have critical voices. So much of the civil society also depends on our funding, on our support, and that shouldn't stop. It's critical everywhere in the world. Debates, bringing it to the agenda, making sure it's being spoken about with policymakers, the Human Rights Subcommittee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, just making sure that human rights and international law stay at the forefront of what we think about when we think about our foreign policy here in the European Union.
Thank you so much, Catarina. We were here with Catarina Vieira, a member of our subcommittee on human rights, and with Shafi and Gabriela, both Sakharov Fellows of the European Parliament. Thanks for listening and good afternoon.